There's a new worry on our southern border tonight, with border agents overwhelmed by
when Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems.
Welcome, class. Today we are going to cover a controversial topic that deals with immigration. And since I can recall, it feels like every election deals with immigration.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country.
We're going to get control of our borders. We're going to make this country safer for all our citizens.
I would build a great wall, and nobody builds walls better than me, believe me. And I'll build them very inexpensively.
President Trump captured the imagination of many American voters with a single campaign when he promised he was going to build a Great Wall. And he added, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. And almost 2 years before NAFTA, in 1996, a new law provided enough money for a second wall layer. However, Donald Trump's idea of building a wall has decades of long history. After the 1986 amnesty, when President Ronald Reagan traded increased border security for the legalization of close to 3 million unauthorized immigrants, the San Diego Border Patrol built a 10-foot welded steel fence along 14-mile section of the border closest to the Pacific. And that was done with the support of President Clinton, the so-called Operation Gatekeeper. The operation promised prevention through deterrence. The Border Patrol's public rationale was that making it harder to cross the border would mean fewer people will try to come to the U.S. However, that did not happen because migrants have a long history of doing agricultural work in the U.S., which is the U.S. economy depends on. President Obama's legacy on immigration enforcement appears to be a contradiction. He claimed to be a humanitarian who sought to deport only felons, not families, while granting relief from deportations to hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants. At the same time, he was labeled as the deporter-in-chief. It's important to note that during Obama administration, he oversaw historic rises in deportation rates. The Secure Fence Act of 2006 legislation authorizing a barrier along the southern border passed into a law with the support of 26 Democratic senators, including party leaders like Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and Chuck Schumer. Democrats have done their fair share of damage when it comes down to deportation. The legacy of the 96 law implemented during Bill Clinton, more legal migrants, including green card holders, became eligible for deportation. This is the beginning of family separation. We saw an increase of deported veterans. It was hard for a lot of them to challenge their cases in court. These are the two stories of Alex Murillo, a deported veteran of the Navy, and Luis Ortiz, a DACA recipient.
We feel that as U.S. veterans, we are Americans and we deserve and have fought for and earned the right to be home with our family. We were willing to die for America, to fight for America, and then we find ourselves now outside of America.
My name is Luis Jesus Ortiz. I'm 20 years old. I got deported 3 days ago. I crossed the border when I was 5 years old. I'm only 20. I've been there for 15 years of my life. It's bad. Like, just be able to be taken from your family, your home, your place. Like, I'm basically an American. Immigration out there, like, they don't play. They'll take you, like, they'll snatch you.
The reality is that the last 3 decades, Mexican immigration is a salient political issue in every U.S. national and state election. Aside from keeping humans away by having a fence, the U.S.-Mexican border region has the highest rate of species endangerment. Sadly, our politics also affects the environment, and the ecosystem in this part of the region are split by a political boundary that greatly complicates conservation efforts. However, Mexico continues to be our number one trading partner. These communities are fully integrated. The border runs 4 U.S. states, in California being one of the states with the largest U.S. economy and also one of the largest in the world. Mexico has 6 states, being Nuevo León the one with the most robust economy for Mexico. So this region has about 50 million people. It is the busiest, most frequently crossed border in the world. So we have to put into context that $1.7 billion of product that crosses the border every day. The traffic flow of people at any given day is about 500,000, over 20,000 cars a day, and 200,000 trucks. It tells you the huge dimension of this border region. So when we have this flow of people, cars, goods coming across, it makes these cities almost like sister cities. They rely on each other. For example, we have Tijuana, San Diego, El Paso, Juarez. But having this border wall, it is just a false sense of security. For example, 90% of cocaine comes to the US through the Mexican border. Then we have the high sales of guns that flows the other way. The sales of firearms causes a huge problem for Mexico. There was about 250,000 firearms that were bought in the US and taken across into Mexico. The more civilian and border agents are added to our border, it becomes harder for migrants to make it across. CBP, which is Customs and Border Protection, has a budget of about $13.5 billion a year. Between 2004 and 2020, the number of border agents doubled. The CBP operates in what the U.S. considers border territory, which is anything 100 miles from the border itself. For example, if you take the I-15 north between the city of Escondido and Temecula, there's a border patrol station. At these border checkpoints, anyone can be stopped on reasonable suspicious ground, even if you happen to be a U.S. citizen. The Border Patrol has made it really hard for migrants to come across. Migrants often hire a coyote, which is a nickname for human smugglers, to help them across the border. But those coyotes, most of the time, have ties with the drug cartels, and they rob and abuse migrants. In the last decade, thousands of migrants have died trying to come across. Human rights activists blame both the U.S. militarization that pushes migrants to cross through the mountains and deserts, and also the coyotes who prey on migrants' desperation.
Bueno, nos encontramos en Jacumba, California, en la mitad del desierto. Literalmente, la frontera se encuentra dividida en el desierto de California y es un área muy común donde los inmigrantes suelen saltar este muro que ustedes ven de contención. Aquí podemos ver unas zapatillas hechas que la hacen con el fin de borrar sus huellas y tratar de disuadir a la patrulla fronteriza. Sin embargo, es un área muy peligrosa ya que muchos emigrantes mueren del intenso calor. Recientemente, desde el 2012, más de 2.000 emigrantes en esta área han sido tratados por el calor, deshidratación.
The reality of this border is that creates a unique environment of a dual culture and history. The fronterizo, which I like to refer to the people who live at the border, is a hybrid community. They flow well in English and Spanish. They're bicultural. And their ability to adapt to all these changes pushed by immigration reforms prove how creative they have to be in order to function in a space that is constantly changing and challenged.
When we welcome the immigrant with his talents or her dreams, we are renewed. As long as walls exist in our hearts to separate us from those who don't look like us or think like us or worship as we do,